Welcome to Speakernomics, the official podcast of the National Speakers Association. I'm Kenneth Kinney, but friends call me Shark, and like you, I'm a professional speaker and I love listening to Speakernomics. Speakernomics is the professional speaker show that will help you thrive and grow a speaking business so you too can change the world, one keynote session workshop and speech at a time. And on this episode, we're going to have some fun today and a few good lessons. We'll hear from some amazing speakers, and then we'll draw some insights through all of their stories. Now, to all my speaking friends, have you ever had an epic fail on stage? I know I have. Unless you've been touched by an angel, at least a speaking one, then the answer is yes. Whether it was the power, your slides, fire alarms, memory lapses, problems with an audience member, a faulty microphone, wardrobe failures, or one of a million other reasons. Now, Edward Aloysius Murphy Jr. was an aerospace engineer and not a speaker, but it sure seemed like when he was credited with Murphy's Law, they were talking about what speakers go through on a regular basis. But audiences and meeting planners still want you to give a great speech. So the question is, how do you recover? How do you stay nimble to go with the flow and hurdle whatever obstacle comes in front of you? After all, you are a professional speaker, hopefully an epic one. And some of the stories here should help you take a new look at how to create your own Scout's motto to be the best prepared for whatever happens. And let me remind you, too, that if you're not following their voices on the audio version, then make sure to check out NSA's YouTube channel to watch the video version of the show there. The experts that we are showcasing today, in order of appearance, include CSP Marcus Sheridan, CSP Justin Jones-Fosu, CSP Jess Pettit, CSP and CPAE Mary Kelly, CSP and CPAE Jeff Savilico, CSP Michelle McCullough, CSP and CPAE Sam Richter, Fotinia Katamopoulos, Corey Perlman, Diana Kander, CSP Rob Foray, CSP CPAE and Cavett Award recipient Willie Jolly, CSP CPAE and Cavett Award recipient Scott McCain, and finally CSP and Cavett Award recipient Ruby Newell-Legner. And before we jump in, make sure to go to Speakernomics.com. That's where you can find the tips, insights, and knowledge to help you become a better speaker, build a better business, and get paid to speak. Now, let's hear from some special people about their own epic failures and how they recovered. And then I'll see you on the other side with some key takeaways. Marcus, we've all had epic fails as speakers. What is your greatest epic fail, and how did you recover from it?
Yeah, this was a tough moment for me. I really wanted to be a speaker. I knew I wanted to be a speaker. In 2012, I got my first big break. I was a breakout speaker for a new event with Joe Polizzi that he was putting on called Content Marketing World.
Oh, yeah.
And at that event,
in Cleveland.
Sure was, in Cleveland. And how it worked was, and I didn't know this at the time, but whoever got the highest rated speech of 2012 would become the keynote for 2013. And so I had the highest rated talk of 2012. I was a new speaker. This was one of my first events. And I got the keynote. And I thought, oh my gosh, my life is going to change. And I had a whole year to think about this keynote. And so 2013 came around. I was on the big stage, really dark room. And I was just going, man. I was just going to town, and things were going pretty well with the audience. I was feeling great. And then all of a sudden, I see Joe on the side of the stage, and he starts walking to me on the stage. And he says, "Marcus, you're 15 minutes over." I said, I didn't realize. I'll finish right now. He said, "No, you have to stop." And so I fumbled to stop in the next, basically, I guess it was 2 minutes. And the room cleared out. And I thought, I can't believe what just happened. I got lost in terms of time. I don't know how it happened. I think I was trying to put 10 pounds of stuff in a 5-pound bag, probably. And because of that, I completely blew my time limit. Now, the good thing was there was a 30-minute break in between me and the next sessions. So I didn't encroach. But the guilt that I felt so guilty and so embarrassed that when the room cleared out, and there's 1,200 seats, I was sitting on the stage and I was like literally crying because for 1 year I said, this event is going to catapult me to be a world-class, busy, professional speaker. And I let a friend down. I let an audience down. I let vendors down because I had encroached on their time. And the shame that I felt was incredibly significant. And of course, the keynote itself fizzled from that point. I mean, but Joe had no choice. He had no choice. So it was incredible embarrassment. Joe was incredibly forgiving, though. And he had me right back the next year, and he's had me back many times since. And he always says, dude, I don't even know why you care about it. But I can tell you this, Shark, I have never gone over time since that day. And it's been 12 years. And I really learned that day the importance of preparation, not winging it and not trusting your gut to know every single time exactly, okay, this is where you are in terms of time. Because even though you might have delivered a message before, it doesn't mean that day, for whatever reason, you might be a little bit off, and therefore you might be affecting the whole conference schedule. I was lucky there was a 30-minute break, but yeah, that was the most shame and the most embarrassment I've ever felt as a speaker, getting hooked off of the stage in front of 1,200 people.
Yeah, you remember it so vividly more than a decade later. It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel it. I still feel it to this day.
Justin, what's the worst fail you've ever had on stage, and how did you recover?
So this was the technical kind.
Yeah.
So I had a
Your speech was perfect, but the slides or something. Yes.
the technical kind.
Yeah.
No, it was a clothing technical kind. So, my pants were ripped in the lower region area, and I sat there. I was standing there, and I realized that they had just ripped. I don't know what I did, and literally, I did lateral movements for the rest of the talk. Fortunately, in my car, I had a change of pants. So after I was able to get the talk, I went and changed my pants. But the only way I recovered is by I couldn't be the normal Justin that was jumping around.
You wear such subtle clothing, so nobody would ever notice your pants or your jacket.
Yes. So I became a little crab during my speech. I was like, end point. End point. And so that's how I recovered.
I should have the story of why you wear the hat.
Yeah, exactly.
Took them off and that's how you recover. No, that's great.
That sounds like a good podcast. Why I wear my hat.
Jess, what is your most epic fail, and how did you recover from it?
Just one?
Just one. Two, but we've only got 4 hours for the show.
I know. Okay, so I'm going to say #wrong Disney. Now, what do I mean by #wrong Disney? At the time, the national conference influence was in Orlando, the one in Florida, and Orlando in Florida. That is an obvious statement, but there's a Disney property.
Yeah, Orlando, New Mexico. We never did one there. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. I was serving on the national board at the time, and one of my clients was really having a very rough year, and they were having a big board meeting, kind of come together and figure out, like, is the organization going to close? What's the future of the organization? It is a big, big meeting, and they're having it at Disney. And so I said, you know what? I'm already going to be in Disney. If you can plan it around the board meetings, and I was hoping around at least the keynotes of NSA or Influence, I am more than happy to just drop in. Like, let me do like a touch base with the board members. Let's see what can happen if you need me to facilitate something. I could do that while I'm at the event, because I know it's been a really, really rough year. And they said, yes, everything was great. I'm sitting at the board meeting, and I get the first text message, and the first text message from the client is like, we're really looking forward to you. Just so you know, the first meeting that we have you on the schedule is 2 days from now at this time. And I was like, great, where in the hotel? They said the name of the hotel, and I was like, no. Like Dolphin, Swan, which one are you talking about? And she was like, what is a dolphin or a swan? And I was like, those big fountains outside the hotel, like which one are you staying in? And she's like, we don't have dolphins and swans. And I was like, all right, I'll figure it out. No worries. Don't worry about it. So, it's texting. So then I lean over and I ask one of the other board members, do you know which property, whatever the name of the hotel was, do you know where it is? Is it dolphin or swan? Is it a different ballroom? And they're like, what are you talking about? And they told the word, I think it's Pasadena, Burbank, some other word. And evidently there are 2 Disney properties. Didn't know if you know that.
Wow.
So I finished board meetings. I took a red-eye flight to the wrong Disney, showed up, facilitated a whole day with this board that desperately needed help. And I took a red-eye back and made it in time for the second day, maybe even the first half of the first day of influence, because wrong Disney. But that's what you do for your clients. I was exhausted. That's when I learned I'm too old to take a red eye. But I also learned that that's the level of service that I would expect if I was hiring somebody, and you keep your promises. So, ouch, wrong Disney.
Mary, do you have an epic fail as a speaker or in your speaking business, and how did you recover from it?
Not once, but twice, where I have spoken in a major hotel, the fire alarms have gone off. And sometimes they go off and then the alarms sound and then they make an announcement and then the meeting planner says, hey, let's just take a 5-minute break and this will all clear out. The first time, not only did the fire department show up, but they went with the hoses between me and my audience. So that was a good one. I have had that happen not once, but twice. So I'm still talking, the alarms are going off, the lights are blinking, and there's the automatic voice that is going over my microphone telling people to evacuate the building. Meanwhile, the meeting planners in the back going, don't evacuate 5,000 people from the building. So you just keep going. The second epic fail is, again, and I've had that happen twice with the fire alarms. The second epic fail is, again, about 5,500 people, major convention center, they lose power. The building is dark. There are 5,000 people sitting in the dark. I have no slides. I have nothing. Now, I was in the Navy and I know how to holler. And I said, people, just because it's dark does not mean you get to get handsy with your neighbor. And now that I have your attention, we're going to keep going because we cannot waste time. Time is a finite number of unknown seconds. And people laughed and we just kept going. And I had rapt attention for about 18 minutes until the lights came back on.
Jeff, you've given a lot of presentations, both as a speaker and entertainer. What is an epic fail that you may have had on stage, and how did you recover from it?
Wow. How much time do we have? Epic fails. Okay. The entertainer ones come to mind first. I'll go here. This is one that was kind of hurtful for me. I was like, ooh, this was a kind of a vulnerable one. I've done a thing with where I'm juggling apples, right? Like juggling apples and eating them at the same time. And it's not a part of my shows, my keynotes, but I do it when I'm doing shows for kids in hospitals or virtual shows with families. So it's not in any of my stage stuff because it's small, but it's funny, right? Like, got apple schmutz everywhere. And it's like, you're talking and it just looks kind of fun. So I did this without even thinking about it. I did this when I was doing my Laughter Without Borders shows, which are, philanthropic mission shows for kids in need and disadvantaged kids and everything. And I thought it would be really funny because, it's visual and we didn't speak the same language and else, but it didn't hit. And then I was talking with the contact afterwards, and it was like so obvious to me now. It's like, dude, what was I thinking? Like, these kids are like hungry. They're looking for their next meal. So it's not funny, It was like, how did I not? Like, I knew that on some level, but that was just such a really powerful cultural shift of like, I need to be more aware of the situation and who my audience is and what their struggles are. And I actually did really think about how that applies to the corporate market, right? And keynote, because I'm not normally performing for kids. This is like a special thing. And so I thought about that, like that was one that was going to stick with me because it was really powerful. And you could tell the person who I was talking to, the adult contact, like she didn't want to make me feel bad because she knew that was not my intent, right? I was like, oh, this would be fun. It was silly. But she kind of like nicely said, a lot of these kids like have one meal a day. And, think about that. If you're doing it in the US, like that's funny. There's food falling everywhere. Like you're being silly and sly. But for them, it's like you're wasting food. Like we could use that. And so that was one of those ones that was just like a total punch in the face. Like I felt like such a ding dong. But it was good learning opportunity for me. It was a good lesson learned, and it was humbling for sure because I wasn't expecting that. And it definitely made me think about when I'm speaking to an audience, where are they? Like meeting them where they are and understanding, having a really deep understanding of what's going on in their lives and the challenges they're facing, most likely are not going to be, where do they get their next meal? But they could be dealing with issues that are just as important and powerful and potentially hurtful to them. So it was a very good lesson learned, like pretty early on in my career, relatively.
Michelle, do you have an epic fail that you made on stage, and how did you recover from it?
Okay, so a couple of years ago, I was invited to go speak for a corporation that is a corporation of accountants. And so they had financial planners and accountants, but the CEO brought me in for their annual event, and they were bringing him in from multiple offices. And I was doing a 4-hour event that day. So I was in charge of from 1 to 4 p.m. We were talking about leadership, high performance, and emotional wellness. And so I had missed the morning. And so in my conversation with the meeting planner and the CEO beforehand, I just said, tell me a little bit about your group so that I knew what kinds of things to do, how engaged were they going to be? And he said, listen, they are super fun. They are exciting. They love activities. They'll get involved in any games that you play. And so I thought, oh, sweet, like a group of fun accountants. I'm excited about this. And so when I get there, it was the holiday time. I had missed the morning, which I don't love to miss a morning when I'm the afternoon. And so I just wanted to do an activity where they could kind of share with me what they had learned in the morning, and so that I could kind of get an idea of what we were building on for the day. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. One of the things that I do when I open, especially for this particular presentation, is I tell a story about me doing karaoke on a cruise ship. And so I said, now I'm going to give you an opportunity to take the mic. I'm going to divide you into groups. And when you're in your groups, I want you to share something that you learned this morning to the tune of Jingle Bells. Everyone knows the tune of Jingle Bells. I played it for them really quickly so that they had it. And so as I'm dividing people into groups, the energy in the room gets sucked out. Like they are mortified. No one wants to do this. And I am still plugging along, giving them the instructions, getting them into groups, telling them what to do. Meanwhile, my brain is going, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. What are you going to do, Michelle? And so I'm just being peppy and happy and giving them some suggestions and ideas once they're all divided into groups. And I realize that this is going south fast. They are about to all leave the room. And the only thing I can think of to do is say, just kidding. And send them back to their spots. And luckily that worked. And luckily they all took a big, deep breath. And luckily throughout the day, we were able to use both the tie back to my story and also a tie back to that where I could say, hey, you're welcome. Who wants to share something on this? And because it was very interactive. And I said, you have two choices. You can sing it or you can say it. And they always chose to say it. But I'm grateful in that moment that I could feel the energy shifting. I'm grateful in that moment that I was not stuck on what I had planned and that I was willing to be kind of flexible. And I'm grateful that saying just kidding and letting it go was able to change the mood and bring it back. So they will never know that I actually was really excited about them doing that because I've done it with other groups and it's totally worked. But I also know that not every group, and I have learned that if someone tells you that their group of accountants is exciting, it's a lie.
Ho, ho, ho. Sam, have you ever had an epic fail as a speaker? on stage, and how did you recover from it?
Yeah, great question. So I'm speaking at MDRT, Million Dollar Roundtable, about 10,000 people in the audience. Now, my presentation is very, very visual. So in an hour-long presentation, I might have 280 slides. It's all animated, video, audio. The timing has to be perfect. All right. So I'm doing MDRT. Normally, they give a speaker 20 minutes. And I said, look, I can do it in 20, but there's a lot of important information that I'd love to share. They said, fine, we'll give you 30. And then the meeting planner said, but if you go 1 second over, you will never work in this industry again. So I was like, okay, a little bit of pressure. Now, at MDRT, it's in multiple languages. So they have translators in the back in the glass booths who are translating live. Well, because my presentation, the timing has to be perfect, I pre-recorded the presentation, sent it to all the translators, had a conversation with the translators, and I said, here's where I'm going to be telling jokes, because I don't want that wave of laughter. It's always like somebody's listening in this language, they start laughing, so they've got it down perfect. It's going great. I get to the stage. They've got the $1 million setup. I said, can I use my computer? Because I know it'll work. They said, no, you have to use ours. Fine. I loaded the memory stick on. I said, but do me this favor. I said, just load it on 2 other machines and give me the clickers for both of those machines. So I had a clicker in my hand, clicker in my back left, clicker in my back right pocket. Okay. So I'm on stage. Everything's going perfect. About 15 minutes in. And of course, I get the blue screen of death. Their computer crashed because my PowerPoint presentation was too big for their computer. And remember, I can't go a second over. So I just start making up stuff, right? Because I do talk about technology. So, I go down to some stories that this is what's supposed to, everybody thinks that it's part of the gig. Well, after probably 30 seconds, although for me it felt like 30 minutes, but 30 seconds, the screen comes back up. I'm cool, right? I've got my hands in my back pocket. I figure out which clicker it is and I keep going. But the problem is the translators in the back have no idea because they think the screen crashing, the blue screen of death, was part of my program. And I never prepped them on that. So they're in the back. So my best friend, Ross Bernstein, sitting in the front row, because he's giving the speech at MDRT the next day, he's sitting in the front row and he's hysterically laughing at me, pointing at the translators who've got their hands going up in the air. They don't know what's going on. Anyhow, I got through it. I finished at like 29 minutes and 58 seconds. It was perfect. People actually came up to me afterwards. They said, how in the world were you able to get your computer to crash at the exact right time? So it worked fine, recovered. I said that the only huge glitch there is I'm like biting my tongue so hard because Bernstein's laughing and pointing at the people, and I'm starting to laugh, so I got to bite my tongue and speak at the same time. So that was probably the worst one.
Fotini, you've been a speaker a long time. Do you have any epic fails as a speaker, and how did you recover from them?
So I've had some stumbles along the way as a speaker, but my most epic fail actually came when I was a teenager. So I was that kid in school that was doing all the speech competitions and getting to the head of the first in class and then the school level and so on. And then this one speech in particular, I think I was 15 or 16 years old, and I got to represent
5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's all those L'Oreal products that been using since I worked there. So I got to go and represent the school at what was the Legion, and I don't know what you call them down in the States or what your similar organizations are, but basically it was a lot of senior citizen old white men. And when I showed up, I didn't realize that I was going to be presenting to a lot of senior citizen old white men, and I had a speech that I wrote about breast cancer. So it wasn't exactly the ideal audience. I walked in there and I was like, okay, well, this is not going to be a lot of fun. But I just powered through. I mean, honestly, there's no other option to do except I cracked a joke about it at the very beginning. And I think that was my way of kind of breaking the ice and making them actually want to listen. But they were all very kind about it afterwards and congratulatory. And I won a little mini scholarship of some kind. But I went in there going, oh God, this is the wrong content for the wrong audience. But it was not as epic a fail as I thought it was going to be.
And I'm sure the doctors had never seen that many old men come in for mammograms. before.
Yeah, well, that's just it. That's what I was talking
That's
about.
the result. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about my grandmother who, passed away, and this woman who did this, and I was like, there's not a woman to be seen in this room right now. But hopefully they'll go away and tell their wives to go get a mammogram when all is said and done, and maybe it wouldn't be a fail at all.
Corey, do you have an epic fail as a speaker, and how did you recover from it?
Oh boy, do I ever. In this business, it's always important to keep your ego at check because karma and the universe will do it for you. I had come off one of my best gigs I'd ever had. I was feeling good, feeling high, just feeling like I was, whatever. And I had this other gig that was local here in Atlanta, which was great. And, I hadn't heard really from the meeting planner for a while, but that was kind of fine. I had it all lined up, had a contract, but things had kind of gotten a little bit quiet, but that was fine. So I headed over that way. It was near the airport, started getting, got all my stuff together, had books with me. So, I'm lugging around big box of books and all my materials. And I prepared for this event, and all this. And for those of you who know Atlanta, this was at the convention center. So, it was like a 1.5 mile walk. I'm sweating. I'm in my suit, but I'm still, I'm feeling good. Like I got bounce in my step because I'm a keynote speaker and whatever. And I'm walking around, I'm seeing all these pictures of speakers and mine's not there, but that's fine. I'm sure eventually I'll see mine, and I'm looking for my room and all this stuff and see nothing. Finally, I see somebody with a badge and I'm just like, hey, I'm looking for my room. My name's Corey Perlman. She's like, no, I don't know, sorry. And I go to the next person, nothing. And well, lo and behold, I'm not on the docket. That meeting planner that had booked me for the gig was gone, and I am not on this gig. I am literally at a speaking event and I'm not a speaker. So I went from feeling up here to feeling about as low as I possibly could feel. So now what do? I got 150 books. I got my presentation. I'm in a suit, So I just networked for a while. I shook some hands. I hung out. I ate some food. I was there. I might as well, the buffet was there. They weren't checking badges, had a good meal, and made it a day. So what are you going to do? The highs and lows of the speaking business.
Were you able to ever get in touch with the other folks, though, to talk about a future gig for them?
They apologized profusely, and they just said that, that lady should have followed up with me, and that was the last I ever heard from them.
Diana, do you have an epic fail in your speaking career, and how did you recover from it?
Yes. One time, 5 minutes before going on stage, the conference organizer came up and he said, hey, just want to let you know, like 20% of this audience, it's like a room of 800 people, they don't speak English. And I said, oh, why did they come? Why are they here? And he said, well, they had to pick a session and they're really here for this other, Spanish speaking part. And I said, oh, okay. And they were like scattered throughout the audience, and my speech is very interactive. So I would come up during the interactive portions and I would say, and what do you think about this? And people would go, they're like, I'm one of those people. And it was like playing Minesweeper, like every now and then people were like, nope, not me. And that was a fun opportunity to tap dance, and just see what you're made of as a speaker, as in every epic fail is.
Rob, you got a ton of experience as a speaker, as an MC, and in many things, but you've got to have at least one epic fail. Tell us about an epic fail and how you recovered from it.
Well, I have an epic fail that caught up with me 10 years after the fact. In my previous life with my career as a DJ, I did weddings. And there was one particular wedding where everything that could go wrong went wrong. And I received a 2-star review, my only 2-star review. So fast forward 10 years later, this June, I'm in Indianapolis doing a team building game show event. I'm going through the audience and somebody raises their hand as I'm doing Name That TV Theme Song. I go to this young lady, she raises her hand and I look at her and I recognized her immediately. And I say on the mic, I know you, I DJ'd your wedding. And she said, yes, you did. I'd like to win a prize. And so I gave her the trivia question. She did not get it right. And I said, well, we're friends. Go ahead, take the money. And she said, no, thank you. That screwed with my mind I was looking at her and I was like, okay, I'm trying to bridge the gap here. I'm trying to say sorry over the mic. This is probably not the spot to do it in the middle of a team building game show event. And so that threw off my mindset throughout the entire event. But what I had to do is I had to get back into the game and I had to move on from that moment. Now, here's the good news. After the event, she came up to me and she said, you know what? You are doing what you're meant to do. Maybe kind of a little bit of shade throwing at me, saying, you know what, that wedding DJ thing probably wasn't the best thing for you, but what you're doing now, this is great. But in that moment, I also apologized to her. And I said, if I could take back everything that went wrong that day on my end, and I'm so sorry what happened on your end as well, because there was things on her end that went wrong, but were projected onto me. But we talked about it, we talked it out, and we hugged it out as well. I asked for a hug at the end and I said, thank you so much. And we hugged it out and we smiled and we laughed about the situation 10 years later. But what happened in that moment just completely threw me off my game. So if those moments happen, hopefully you can get back on track and then hug it out afterwards.
As Paul Harvey would say, the rest of the story is she gave the groom a 1-star review and then they ended up divorced and alone.
Actually, the good news is she's still married. They have 2 wonderful kids. So I did not ruin a marriage. It was just the circumstances of that day. There were many different things that went on. You can ask me in a private conversation, what did go wrong that day? I'll tell you later.
Willie, do you have an epic fail in your speaking business, and how did you recover from it? You've given a lot of speeches. There's got to be at least one.
Well, I've had a lot of epic fails, but I think of one where I had some brand new dress shoes, nice shoes, very nice shoes, but the soles had not been scratched up yet. And
took them out of the box and went right to the stage.
Right to the speech. And going up the stage, I put my foot on the edge of the step and fell all the way back down to the bottom of the steps.
Ooh.
I got up. I walked up the stairs carefully. I got to the microphone and I said, that is why I'm here today. Every time I fall, I get back up. There's a story about a lady. She got pregnant 12th grade of high school. She got married to the father of the child, but he was abusive. She had 2 more children with him, but he continued to be abusive. And one day she said, I'm tired of getting this abuse. And she left him. She had no education. She had no skills. She left him with 3 children. So she took a job in a real estate office answering the phones. She kept looking at the realtors drive up in these big fancy cars. And she said, what would it take for me to be able to do what they do? Said, you have to take the course. You got to get your license. And she said, I took the course, but I failed the test. So I took the course again and I failed again because I didn't read well. So I had to go back and get my reading skills better. So I took some remedial classes in reading until I could read better and comprehend better. Then I took the test again and I passed it. And then I had to start this process of knocking on doors, making phone calls. Nobody knew who I was. And most people slammed the door in my face, hung up the phone in my face. But I kept doing it. And when I'd fail, I got back up. And she went from the lady answering the phone to get her license, become a realtor, and rose up the ranks till she became the #1 realtor in that office. And it was a big night. for the awards gala. She had never been to a gala before. She got a fancy long dress. She had never had a long, fancy evening gown on. And she was going up the steps, and she stepped on the edge of the dress as she got to the top step, and fell flat on her face. The air went out of the room. She got up and dusted herself off, and she said, "That's why I'm here tonight with this award. Because every time I fall and every time I fell, I've gotten up and go on to win." That was the lesson I shared of that day. People hollered and screamed when I gave that story. I said, when you fall down, get back up. When you have a setback, get back up, because a setback is a setup for a comeback. They hollered and screamed. They thought I had planned it. Even though I hadn't. I didn't tell them I hadn't. So, you know what? With every blessing, there's a burden. With every burden, there's a blessing. With every setback, it's just a setup for a greater comeback. Use it as leverage for your greater success.
Scott, tell me a time when you've had an epic fail on the stage, and how did you recover from it?
Gosh, I have had so many. I don't know where to begin. Here's a couple that come to mind quickly. When I first started, head tables were very common at meetings. You would have a head table where the leaders of the association would be, and they would have a lectern on the table, and then you would get up from your spot at the head table and address the group. But I don't like being stuck behind the lectern. I like, being out front. The problem at this particular one at the Tantera Resort at Lake of the Ozarks was, unbeknownst to me, because of how the skirting was on the table, there was a space about this big between the head table and the riser at the front that they had placed there for me, so I could stand on that and get closer to the audience rather than the barrier. And so they introduced me, and I get up from the head table, and I start out, and I say, but one of the things I love to do is to be closer to the audience. And then I disappeared under the riser. Oh man, hit my head, fell down the whole bit. It's hard to feel like an authority when you're doing that. And I got back up and dusted myself up off, and and you keep going. But I wish I would have been as smart as Tim Gard, who had a similar situation, fell down, and as he's laying there with a wireless mic on, said, "Now I'll take some questions from the floor."
That's great.
But oh my gosh, I've had a million travel instances. I mean, and here's the thing: it's just part of it, And the true pros just keep on keeping on. I had one. I had somebody die during the speech. Fortunately for the meeting, not just fortunately for me as a speaker, he was on the back row, and the guy stood up, and he was going to leave, and he hit the doors of the convention center in St. Louis, and he hit the thing to open the door, and it was like a marionette where somebody just cut the strings. He just collapsed, and it was one of those, you knew that he was just massive, right? I mean, he just was on, and it was obviously a tragedy. But the strange part was I was almost at the end of my speech, so I'm like, wrapping it up, and the meeting professional sees what's happening. Well, she doesn't want it to end because then everybody would stand up and walk out, but he's just outside the door, and the paramedics are there blocking the door. So she looks at me and goes, stretch it out. And so I'm like, there's one thing I forgot to tell you, and I want to come back and talk about that for a few minutes. You can see the audience going, what's he doing? What's he? One other quick one. This was a bad one. When I was in FFA, I was a national FFA officer. So I literally did 500 speeches my year as a national FFA officer, because you're doing Kiwanis clubs and Rotary clubs and high school assemblies and FFA banquets and Farm Bureau meetings and all that. You're speaking 2-3 times a day constantly. And one of the things I was always sensitive of is you'd have a meeting at a rural high school, and the parents are there and the cooks have come in to prepare this meal for, and I always wanted to thank the cooks. And you can see this coming. This kid in his FFA jacket stands up, and I just think and I said, and how about a big round of applause for the cooks? At which point he projectile vomited.
Oh, no.
The instant I said, may we thank the cook. All over the table, all over the, and that was one I may not have recovered properly from.
Ruby, do you have an epic fail as a speaker, and how did you recover from it?
Oh, yeah. Early in my career, I was speaking to my parks and recreation buddies, and I had just set up everything, and we were in a room, and there was 60 chairs, and 75 people came in, and people were sitting on the floor. And I had, this is back in the days where actually women wear pantyhose, if you can imagine that far back. And I had a little short skirt on, and I was very excited about it, and doing the program for all my peers. And I remember getting dressed that morning, and I just had, I grabbed that one size fits all pantyhose, and one size didn't fit all. So they were a little tight, and they kind of, the crotch was kind of down at my knees. And I remember going, oh man, I gotta wear pantyhose because I've got this skirt. And I remember just pulling them up really tight, and they wouldn't stay up. So I put another pair of underwear over the top of the pantyhose, and I pulled them up really tight, and it worked great. So went down into into my room and got all set up, ready to go. And I was presenting, and all of a sudden I felt something kind of creeping down, and suddenly I felt something kind of like right below my skirt, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that underwear's not doing its job. And I, what do you do? I've got people sitting on the floor right beside me, and so I was doing a program on active listening. So I started off the program by saying, okay, folks, we're going to talk about what we've learned so far today. And we're going to talk about active listening. And use good eye contact, because we're going to talk about that today. So turn to your neighbor and share what you learned so far in the conference, and look at your neighbor, good eye contact, and we'll be right back. So turn to your neighbor and share what you learned. And they turned to each other, and I reached down and I pulled up that underwear. And it worked. But that was probably the most embarrassing moment of my career. And luckily it was at the very beginning. And by the way, I don't wear skirts anymore, and I don't wear pantyhose anymore. And that was, you just have to think on your feet. But losing my underwear in front of my peers was probably the most embarrassing moment.
Yeah, well, you were definitely leaving it all on stage.
Yeah, leaving it all on stage, yeah.
Let's do a quick recap then, based on their expert advice on how you too can recover from an epic fail. So many great lessons. Respect the time allotted. Have backup clothes. Triple check your travel. Quadruple check your props. Check in frequently with meeting planners ahead of time. Be ready to pivot for what you think might react well but doesn't with an audience. Don't worry about fire alarms. Learn as much as you can about the audience earlier. Pre-scuff those new shoes. Be prepared to stretch a story or two, and be ready to laugh with them when things go wrong, even if they don't see you lose your underwear. Have some fun and laugh a little so they can have some fun with you. A couple of more. Whether you call it disaster preparedness, being vigilant, situational awareness, keeping your head on a swivel, keeping your eyes wide open, or whatever saying you like, just remember to be prepared. Things often don't go as planned 100% of the time. But often with a little humility, a little humor, and a little thinking ahead, you too can be prepared to react to most speaking situations, and make sure the audience and meeting planners know that you will react well 100% of the time when and if something happens. Also, don't let an epic fail take up too much space in your brain. That's something I've been guilty of before. Lesson learned from me, and I've heard from others as well that it's happened to them. Like many of the stories today, it reminds me to keep my performer's hat on, not the hat that reminds me of the blocking and staging and voice tonation and such, but the one that reminds me that we have to perform for them, rain or shine. Great speakers don't need to think too much about the rain chances. They're too busy rocking the mic with one hand and an umbrella in the other. So no epic fails for you today, but if there is one, make the recovery epic. Friends, make sure to join us at Speakernomics.com and let your voice be heard. I'm Kenneth Kinney, your host of the National Speakers Association's podcast, Speakernomics, and this has been another fantastic episode of the show. Thank you for the privilege of your time, and remember, Speakernomics is a podcast where you'll learn to speak, get paid, repeat.